Appreciate it so very much. I want to get on to some other related stories here. These are news stories. From Washington Top News, Al-Qaeda threatens to use undetectable bombs against the U.S. In the latest issue of the terror group's Inspire electronic magazine, an individual called the Al-Qaeda chief was quoted as saying they've developed a bomb in 2009 that the brothers in the External Operation Committee did not give us the green light until recently. Al-Qaeda chief indicates that lessons learned from failures in the past assassination attempts and plots to attack U.S. airplanes and buildings have fed the development of a new generation of what is called undetectable bombs. In The Hidden Bomb, which is a 20-page section of the magazine, the writer goes into painstaking details about how to build and test this kind of bomb. For several months, he said, we conducted a number of experiments. As a result, we came up with these simple materials that are readily available around the globe, even inside America. He said we've spared no effort in simplifying the idea in such a way we made it just another meal to prepare in the kitchen, so that every determined Muslim can prepare it. Yahya Ibram, in a different section of the magazine, also claimed the organization's bomb makers have been working on a recipe that's something unique that can easily be prepared at home. Former TSA Administrator John Pistoli, who left his position to return to private life on December 31st, told Washington Top News last month, "What gives us greatest concern are the non-metallic improvised explosive devices that can go through a metal detector. This is exactly what Al-Qaeda bragged about in its latest edition of Inspire. The group claims to have defeated U.S. layered defenses against detectable concealed explosives. They said the new reality has flipped the coin of war. It has shifted America from an offensive position to a defensive one. We will no longer hear them speaking of the success or failures or the battles for hearts and minds. Instead," he said, "we find them acknowledging their incapability of preventing lone jihad attacks on their soil." And apparently ISIS feels like televised beheadings, cutting kids in half and burying people alive have lost their effectiveness. Recently, ISIS has captured a Jordanian pilot, and they've asked for input on how they should kill him. Well, according to the conservative firing line, Muslim woman demands ISIS impale this captured pilot. Now, this might be somewhat graphic. If you don't want to hear this, then turn away for a minute, but come right back, because here's how this reads. Last Saturday, Walid Shobat said the Muslim woman has issued a video complaint to Caliph al-Baghdadi demanding that ISIS begin impaling their victims because, of course, beheadings and shootings are just too merciful. Shobat explained, "Everyone in the Middle East knows 3 kings told to them by their grandparents about the Ottoman Turks and how they spread throughout the Middle East what they call sha'ir, which is sorcery, bakshish, which is bribery, and the kazuk, which is a spike driven through the victim's rectum, which the Ottomans used to terrify locals and deter potential insurgents." Now, he posted a YouTube video, but YouTube pulled it. Apparently, the truth of ISIS is too much for YouTube to handle. Either that, or it's part of an effort to cover up for these barbarians. But that's not all the woman wants done. Here's what she said. "I am pleading to ISIS to honor my special request that you kazook him, that is to impale him, and post it all over social networks and the media," she said. Shobat describes the method of execution as it was performed by the Turks. This was, at times they used the hot poker, a red-hot metal rod that's inserted through the anus and it comes out the neck or the mouth, which the expert executioner is able to avoid puncturing the heart, and the victim could live up to 2 days before he died, since the bleeding is minimized by the hot rod that cauterizes the wounds. In other words, a method of killing tailor-made for the inhuman beasts of ISIS who have no problem cutting children in two or burying women and children alive. Shobat concluded that when a Muslim woman calls on a caliph for help, he must comply. Well, I have to give some credit to Germany. And for you folks in Germany, this is for you. According to Reuters, German anti-Muslim protesters rally despite Angela Merkel's plea for them not to. In Dresden, Germany, according to Reuters, protesters marched in several German cities on Monday against higher levels of immigration and what they see as the growing influence of Islam, in defiance of appeals from Chancellor Angela Merkel to spurn rallies she views as racist. I'm not sure how Islam has become a race, but according to Angela Merkel, Islam is now a race. It goes on to say the rallies, organized by a new grassroots movement known as Pegida, or the Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamization of the West, have become almost weekly event in the East German city of Dresden in recent months. Some 18,000 people, the biggest number so far, turned out in Dresden on Monday, but similar rallies in Berlin and the west city of Cologne were heavily outnumbered by counter-protesters who accused Pegida of fanning racism and intolerance. Well, the Pegida protesters waved Germany's black, red, and gold flag and brandished posters bearing slogans such as "Against religious fanaticism of every kind." One poster in Cologne called for the potatoes rather than doner kebabs, which is a swipe at the ethnic Turks, who at around 3 million represent Germany's largest immigration community. Germany has some of the world's most liberal asylum rules, partly due to the Nazi past. But the number of asylum seekers arriving in Germany from the Middle East jumped to around 200,000 last year, 4 times as many in 2012. In her New Year's address, Merkel urged Germans to shun the anti-Muslim protesters, saying their hearts were full of hatred. She said we need to say the right-wing extremists' hostility towards foreigners and anti-Semitism should not be allowed any place in our society. In Cologne, home to a large Muslim population, there were 10 times as many counter-protesters as Pegida protesters, and similarly, in multi-ethnic Berlin, some 5,000 counter-protesters swamped about 400 anti-Muslim protesters, according to local police. Germany is a country where refugees are welcome, and the silent majority must not remain silent, but rather go out into the streets and show yourself. Justice Minister Heiko Maas said in the Berlin's counter-demonstration, Pegida has unsettled Germany's political establishment, and it first looked like it was going to help this Eurosceptic party, Alternative for Germany, but the party already suffered an internal power struggle, and it's split over how to deal with the movement. But I would totally agree with what Heiko Maas said. The silent majority must not remain silent, but rather go into the streets and show yourself. They're going to call you names. They're going to say a whole bunch of nasty things about you. I guess I don't understand how they can use the term racist when it comes to the Islamization of Germany. Islam's not a race. But it seems the Islamic jihadists are doing the same thing in Germany as they're trying to do here. Use our own freedoms against us. The German government is saying we're an open and free society. So all you jihadists who want to impale, behead, or cut babies in half, come on in. We have babies here. Everyone's welcome. Come on in. Well, here in America, our president gave an oath to protect us from enemies, foreign and domestic. So I guess Obama doesn't see the jihadists as enemies. We have babies too. Or is it because Obama lies to us about his Muslim roots? All right, I want to cover some other news here. They're calling 2014 the year of the Christian genocide. According to Breitbart News, the year 2014 saw more global persecution of Christians than any other year in recent history. A look around the globe reveals an unprecedented pattern of persecution that's shifted from isolated incidents of hostility to a systematic campaign to exterminate Christians in places where they've lived peacefully for centuries. From the kidnapped schoolgirls and massacres in Nigeria, the displacement of thousands in Central Africa, to the believers arrested for having a Bible in Central Asia, to Miriam Ibram being sentenced to death in the Sudan, to the ISIS slaughters to the couple burned alive for blasphemy and hundreds of girls kidnapped in Pakistan. Christians throughout the world saw a major escalation of persecution in 2014. The Jerusalem Post spoke of the religious cleansing of Middle East Christians. It noted that anti-Christian violence in 2014 saw a transformation from undertold news coverage to the routine reports of radical Islamists seeking to obliterate Christianity's presence. Nina Shea, director of the Houston Institute Center for Religious Freedom, said that persecution no longer adequately describes the treatment of Christians in a growing number of Muslim areas. Religious cleansing, which is a type of cultural genocide, which is a crime against humanity, is a more accurate description, she said. This is now occurring in Iraq, Syria, parts of Nigeria, Egypt, Sudan, Somalia, and Pakistan. As noted in World Affairs, in Iraq, the Islamic State is undertaking a religious cleansing intending to eradicate the entire presence of the country's non-Muslim citizens. This war on Christians is not restricted to Iraq, but it's also underway in other countries in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Extermination campaigns are being carried out by a multitude of extremist groups who are directed most commonly and with special zeal against Christians. And it's not just Christians, it's also Christian churches. Nearly 200 Christian churches have been destroyed in a surge of violence. And why won't the mainstream media utter a single word about this? There's a surge of anti-Christian violence by Muslims around the world that included the destruction of nearly 200 Christian churches in Nigeria during a short period of time around October. In just 2 months, from August to October, nearly 200 Christian churches were destroyed in Nigeria by the Islamic organization Boko Haram and its Muslim allies after their capture of towns and villages in the northeastern state of Borneo. The report said that, in the words of Reverend Abasogi, the director of Catholic Social Communications, the group's seizure of territory in both states have been 185 churches torched and over 190,000 people displaced by Boko Haram. Also in October, the Center of the Studies of Global Christianity in the United States concluded that about 100,000 Christians die every year because of their religious belief. That is to say, 1 every 5 minutes. And on top of that, in many countries, many other religious minorities suffer violence and persecution. In countries like Iraq and Syria, Nigeria, Cameroon, Sudan, Pakistan, Somalia, Egypt, the Christian elderly women and men and their children live in conditions of total insecurity. They're driven from their homes, they're put in prison for blasphemy, they're brutally killed during celebrations. Churches are burned, girls are kidnapped and forced to marry. A report from Arabic media describes how a homemade bomb exploded next to an evangelical Church of God in Upper Egypt. The report said there were no casualties. But in Germany, a Coptic Christian church in European nation was attacked and torched. According to the report, the mayor of Berlin condemned the attack. He just said extremists didn't say anything about Muslims. Then in Iraq, there were bombings that hit and devastated the Church of the Resurrection. In the Philippines, a grenade attack on a church during worship services left 2 Christians dead, 3 others injured. In the Sudan, the Air Force dropped 4 bombs on an Episcopal church in the Nubian mountains. A pastor reported whole property was decimated. There comes a point when we have to realize if we as Americans want to save our liberties, save our freedoms, we need to stand up. We need to swamp the White House and Congress and the Senate with letters and emails and phone calls. We need to demonstrate peacefully in the streets to show we're not going to allow the government to ruin our country, our way of life, and our freedoms. I've about reached my limit. How about you? You can email me at contact@wdeanshook.com. You can come to the webpage, that's wdeanshook.com, Twitter at wdeanshook, Facebook at wdeanshook, and as usual, when the dust settles and the smoke clears, I'm coming right back to you with the truth in the news. I'll see you next time. Thank you.